25-year-old Dane County man who killed and mutilated his parents will be back in court tomorrow.
This is after a judge finds a mistake in the charges Chandler Halderson was found guilty of committing.
NBC 15's Elizabeth Wattis joins us now to explain more about the error and what, if anything, this could mean for his sentence of life without the possibility of parole.
Yeah, I want to be very clear. First off, no matter what happens tomorrow in court, Halderson will still spend the rest of his life behind bars. But the mistake is interesting and centers around two things the killer was charged with: hiding a corpse and mutilating a corpse. Now, I talked with UW law expert John Gross, and he explains it like this. So, in Wisconsin, someone cannot be convicted of both because hiding a corpse is considered a lesser included offense of mutilating a corpse. So basically, if someone is convicted of mutilating a corpse, the more serious crime, it would be implied they would also be guilty of hiding a corpse. So tomorrow in court, we can expect the case is gonna go by pretty quickly. The judge will remove the 2 counts of hiding a corpse from Halderson's record, one for each of his parents, Bart and Krista.
And Elizabeth, you mentioned this at the start of this story. The fact won't change that Halderson is gonna spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Right, he will spend the rest of his life behind bars no matter what, but Halderson's lawyer will have to file another appeal. Halderson's attorney did that at the end of March, but since the charges are going to be different now, they will have to refile that appeal.
Interesting update. Elizabeth, thanks for that.
Yep.
Okay.